The holographic displays across 1,000 worlds flickered simultaneously, their azure light casting an ethereal glow over countless faces turned skyward in anticipation. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Terran Galactic Empire would choose its leader through democratic election rather than hereditary succession. The death of Emperor Valdris IX had left no clear heir, and the Imperial Senate had voted to let the people decide their fate. Capitano Emilia Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the ISV Resolute, watching the electoral broadcast from her position in the outer rim. Her weathered hands gripped the rail as she observed the ceremony unfolding on Neo-Constantinople, the Empire's capital world. At 42, she had served the Imperial Navy for over 2 decades, rising through the ranks on merit and an unwavering sense of duty. Her dark hair was streaked with premature silver, a testament to the stress of commanding deep space operations along the Empire's most volatile borders. "The results are coming in, Capitano," announced Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chin, her tactical officer, as he approached with a data pad. His usually calm demeanor carried an undertone of concern. "The preliminary counts show a surprising lead for the Quartry delegation." Emilia's brow furrowed. The Quartry were a relatively minor system, consisting of 3 harsh industrial worlds on the Empire's periphery. Their population was small compared to the major core worlds, yet somehow they had managed to field a candidate who was resonating across multiple sectors. "Surprising indeed," she murmured, studying the scrolling numbers. "What do we know about their candidate?" "Senator Kalen Vorth," Chen replied, consulting his notes. "Rose to prominence only 5 years ago. Before that, he was a mid-level administrator in the Quartry mining guilds. His platform focuses on restructuring imperial priorities and returning power to the Forgotten Worlds." The words sent a chill down Emilia's spine. In her experience, populist rhetoric often masked more sinister intentions. She had seen enough border conflicts to recognize the signs of systematic destabilization. As the evening progressed, the impossible became reality. Kalen Vorth of Quartry claimed victory with 53% of the galactic vote, a margin that defied every pre-election prediction. The core worlds had voted overwhelmingly against him, but a massive turnout from the outer systems had carried the day. "How is this possible?" demanded Captain Reyes from the nearby cruiser Vigilant during their emergency conference call. "The Quartry systems barely have the infrastructure to support this kind of political mobilization." Emilia shared his skepticism. Something about the election felt orchestrated, too clean and convenient for a candidate who had emerged from obscurity. She made a decision that would change the course of her life and potentially the fate of the Empire. "Chun, I want a full intelligence sweep on the Quartry delegation. Use whatever resources we have in that sector. Something doesn't add up." 3 weeks after the election, the first signs of Emilia's suspicions being justified began to emerge. The new Emperor Vorth had moved quickly to implement his promised restructuring, beginning with the systematic replacement of key military and civilian leadership positions with Quartry loyalists. Commander Sarah Kim, Emilia's intelligence specialist, burst into the captain's ready room without the usual formalities. Her Asian features were taut with urgency, and her typically pristine uniform showed signs of hasty assembly. "Capitano, you need to see this immediately," she said, activating the secure holographic display. "We've intercepted communications from the Quartry home system. The encryption was military-grade, far beyond what a mining world should possess." The display showed a web of communication nodes, with traffic patterns that painted a disturbing picture. Massive data transfers, coordinated timing, and most troubling of all, connections to several known criminal organizations operating in the galactic underworld. "What are we looking at?" Emilia asked, though she suspected she already knew. "A conspiracy that goes back at least a decade," Kim replied grimly. "The Quartry have been systematically building a shadow network across the Outer Rim. Shell companies, mercenary groups, corruption of local officials. It's a textbook destabilization campaign." The evidence was damning. Financial records showed enormous sums of money flowing from unknown sources into Quartry-controlled accounts. Shipping manifests revealed the movement of weapons and technology to systems that should have no need for such materials. Most disturbing of all were the personnel files, thousands of individuals with military backgrounds who had quietly disappeared from official records, only to resurface in positions throughout the new administration. They didn't just win an election, Amelia realized with growing horror. They've been planning a takeover for years. Kim nodded gravely. And now they have access to the Empire's most sensitive information. Fleet positions, defensive strategies, economic vulnerabilities, everything they need to bring it all down from the inside. Amelia stood and began pacing, her mind racing through the implications. The Terran Galactic Empire wasn't perfect, no government spanning 1,000 worlds could be, but it had maintained peace and stability for centuries. Under its protection, countless civilizations had flourished, trade had connected distant worlds, and humanity had spread among the stars. We need more evidence, she decided. Something concrete that we can present to the Senate. That might be difficult, Chin interjected from the doorway, where he had been quietly listening. I've been monitoring the political situation on Neo-Constantinople. Several senators who opposed Vorth during the campaign have been arrested on corruption charges. Others have mysteriously decided to retire from public life. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear. This wasn't just about seizing power. It was about systematically dismantling the institutions that held the Empire together. Capitano, Kim said quietly, I've identified someone who might be able to help us. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenoarchaeologist at the Imperial University. She's been studying pre-Empire civilizations in the Quartry sector and has uncovered some disturbing historical parallels. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Vasquez? Any relation? Kim smiled slightly. Your sister, actually. Her research suggests that the Quartry aren't just planning to destroy the Empire, they're trying to recreate something that came before it. Something that failed catastrophically. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized in the secure communications chamber of the Resolute as a shimmering hologram, her scholarly appearance a stark contrast to her sister's military bearing. Where Amelia was steel and discipline, Elena was intellectual curiosity and boundless energy. Despite their different paths, the sisters shared the same piercing intelligence and unwavering moral compass. Amelia, thank the stars you contacted me. Elena began without preamble. I've been trying to get someone in authority to listen to my findings for months. Tell me everything, Amelia replied, leaning forward intently. Elena activated her own holographic display, showing ancient ruins on a desolate world. This is Quartry Prime, but not as it appears today. These structures predate the current civilization by at least 3,000 years. The Quartry have been deliberately hiding this site from Imperial archaeologists. The images showed a vast underground complex, its architecture distinctly non-human yet somehow familiar. Strange symbols covered the walls, and the layout suggested a highly advanced technological civilization. What you're looking at are the remains of the hegemony of shadows, Elena continued. According to the fragmentary records I've managed to decode, they were a militaristic empire that controlled this sector before humanity ever reached the stars. They ruled through fear, manipulation, and the systematic subjugation of other species. Amelia studied the images carefully. What happened to them? They destroyed themselves, Elena said grimly. The records suggest they became so focused on controlling their subjects that they forgot how to actually govern. Their empire collapsed into chaos and civil war. The few survivors went into hiding, preserving their knowledge and waiting for an opportunity to rebuild. The implications hit Amelia like a physical blow. You're saying the current Quartry are descendants of this ancient empire? Not descendants, the same species, but evolved. They've spent millennia in underground cities, developing their technology and studying the mistakes that led to their downfall. The Quartry we know are just a surface population, kept ignorant of their world's true rulers. Elena pulled up another set of images showing advanced technology buried deep beneath the planet's surface. They've been preparing for this moment for longer than our empire has existed. The election was just a final phase of a plan centuries in the making. Commander Kim, who had been silently analyzing the data, suddenly looked up with alarm. Capitano, if Dr. Vasquez is correct, then every move they've made follows a logical pattern. They're not trying to rule the Empire, they're preparing to harvest it. Harvest? Amelia asked. Elena nodded grimly. The hegemony of shadows didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them. They would strip a civilization of everything valuable, resources, technology, population, and then move on to the next target. It was a form of galactic parasitism. The communication channel suddenly crackled with interference, and Elena's image flickered. Elena, are you there? They've found me, came her sister's voice, distorted by static. Imperial security forces are surrounding the university. Amelia, you have to stop them. The Empire has maybe months before they're ready to begin the final phase. The connection died, leaving Amelia staring at empty space. Her sister was now in the hands of the conspiracy, and time was running out. Within hours of losing contact with Elena, Amelia received an encrypted message through back channels she hadn't used since her days in naval intelligence. The sender was Admiral Helena Reyes, one of the few high-ranking officers who had openly questioned the new Emperor's rapid military restructuring. Captain's Mess, Deck 7, ISV Defiant. Come alone. HR. The Defiant was anchored at Meridian Station, a massive orbital facility in the Centauri system. Amelia took a shuttle under the pretense of routine inspection duties, but her real purpose was far more dangerous. If Admiral Reyes was reaching out through clandestine channels, it meant the situation had deteriorated even further. Admiral Reyes was a woman in her 60s who had earned her rank through 3 decades of distinguished service on the frontier. Her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but her eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen too much political maneuvering destroy good people and institutions. Amelia, she said, standing as the Capitano entered the private dining room. Thank you for coming. We don't have much time. Admiral, what's the situation? Reyes activated a privacy field generator before responding. The device created a localized interference pattern that would defeat most surveillance equipment. It's worse than we thought, Reyes began. In the past week, 7 senior fleet commanders have been arrested or removed from duty. The official charges range from corruption to treason, but the real reason is that they refuse to transfer operational command to courtier appointees. She pulled out a secure data pad and showed Amelia a list of names. Many were officers she knew personally, honest, dedicated professionals who had served the Empire faithfully for decades. They're systematically replacing the entire command structure, Amelia observed. Not just replacing, eliminating, Reyes corrected. 3 of the arrested officers died in custody. Officially from natural causes, but my contacts in medical suggest otherwise. The Admiral moved to a star chart displaying the Empire's current fleet deployments. Red markers indicated ships that had been reassigned to new commanders, while yellow markers showed vessels that had gone dark or were operating under sealed orders. Look at the pattern, Reyes said, tracing lines between the markers. They're positioning loyal units along the major hyperspace routes while isolating potentially hostile forces in the outer systems. It's a classic encirclement strategy. Amelia studied the display with growing alarm. They're preparing for a civil war. Worse. They're preparing for a systematic conquest. Every major industrial world, every strategic resource depot, every communication hub, they'll control all of it within months. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Reyes checked her personal communicator, and her face paled. What is it? Amelia asked. Senator Morrison is dead. Heart attack, they say. He was the last member of the opposition still holding a key committee position. The weight of the moment settled on both women. They were witnessing the death of a 1,000-year-old civilization, and they might be among the few people in a position to do something about it. Admiral, what resources do we have? Reyes smiled grimly. More than you might think, but fewer than we need. There are loyalist cells throughout the fleet, officers who still remember their oath to the Empire rather than to any individual ruler. The problem is coordination and timing. She pulled up another display showing personnel files. I've been quietly building a network of reliable officers. About 40 ships worth across 7 sectors. It's not enough to fight the entire Imperial fleet, but it might be enough to disrupt their plans and buy time for a broader resistance to form. Amelia studied the faces on the screen. Many were people she had served with, officers she trusted implicitly. But 40 ships against thousands seemed like a futile gesture. There has to be another way, she said. Some weakness we can exploit. Actually, there might be, Reyes replied. According to our intelligence, the Courtry are planning something called the Convergence in approximately 6 months. Every piece of evidence suggests this is when they'll make their final move. If we can disrupt that operation, we might prevent the fall of the Empire. Amelia finished. Reyes nodded. But we need to know exactly what they're planning. And for that, we need someone on the inside. 3 weeks later, Amelia found herself in a situation she had never expected, standing in the grand reception hall of the Imperial Palace on Neo-Constantinople, wearing the dress uniform of a newly promoted admiral. The promotion had come as a surprise, part of Emperor Vortha's apparent policy of rewarding outstanding frontier commanders. In reality, she knew it was a trap. Her investigation into the Courtry conspiracy had not gone unnoticed, and bringing her to the capital was either an attempt to co-opt her or eliminate her. Either way, it provided an opportunity to gather intelligence from the heart of the enemy's operation. The reception was a glittering affair, with representatives from across the Empire mingling in the palace's crystalline chambers. But beneath the celebration, Amelia could sense an undercurrent of fear. Too many familiar faces were missing, replaced by strangers with cold eyes and calculating expressions. Admiral Vasquez? A smooth voice said behind her. She turned to see a tall man with pale skin and angular features approaching. His uniform bore the insignia of the Imperial Guard, but something about his bearing suggested he had never served in any legitimate military capacity. Colonel Drajan Kos. He introduced himself with a slight bow. I serve as His Majesty's Special Advisor on Military Affairs. The Emperor is most eager to meet you. Amelia followed Kos through the palace corridors, noting the subtle but significant changes that had been made since her last visit years earlier. Security checkpoints had been reinforced, surveillance equipment was more prominent, and the traditional Imperial Guards had been supplemented by personnel she didn't recognize. Emperor Vorth received them in his private study, a chamber that had once been a sanctuary of Imperial history and tradition. The ancient artifacts and historical displays had been replaced with stark technological interfaces and monitoring equipment. The man himself was smaller than Amelia had expected, with thinning hair and soft features that belied the ruthless intelligence in his eyes. Admiral Vasquez? He said without looking up from the holographic displays surrounding his desk. Your reputation precedes you. 23 years of distinguished service, commendations for valor, and most recently, some very creative investigative work in the Outer Rim. The last comment sent a chill through Amelia, but she maintained her composure. Your Majesty, I serve at the pleasure of the Empire. Vorth finally looked up, and Amelia was struck by the complete absence of warmth in his gaze. This was not a man driven by ideology, or even ambition. This was something else entirely. The Empire, he repeated slowly. An interesting concept. A political entity spanning 1,000 worlds, held together by nothing more than shared delusions of grandeur and the threat of military force. Tell me, Admiral, what makes you think such a system deserves to survive? The question was clearly a test, but Amelia wasn't sure what answer he was looking for. She decided on honesty. The Empire isn't perfect, Your Majesty, but it has provided peace and prosperity for billions of people across the galaxy. It has allowed countless civilizations to flourish under the protection of law and order. Vorth smiled, but there was no humor in it. Law and order. Yes, the great imperial virtues. But what happens when that law becomes oppression, and that order becomes stagnation? What happens when a civilization becomes so comfortable with its success that it forgets the struggle that created it? He gestured to the displays around them, which showed real-time feeds from across the Empire. Look at these worlds, Admiral. Soft, complacent, dependent on a system they no longer understand or appreciate. They have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. With respect, Your Majesty, peace is not a weakness. Isn't it? Vorth stood and moved to a large window overlooking the capital city. In nature, Admiral, species that become too comfortable in their environment inevitably face extinction when conditions change. The Terran Empire has become humanity's greatest weakness, a crutch that prevents us from evolving. Amelia began to understand the true scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't just about political power or even conquest. It was about something far more fundamental and terrifying. The convergence, she said quietly. Vorth turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. Colonel Koss, it appears our new admiral is even more well-informed than we thought. Koss stepped forward, his hand moving subtly toward his sidearm. But Vorth raised a hand to stop him. Actually, this presents an opportunity, the Emperor said. Admiral Vasquez, your investigation has been thorough and your conclusions largely accurate. You understand the scope of what we're attempting. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to recognize the inevitable. And if I refuse to cooperate? Vorth's smile returned. Then you'll join your sister in our research facilities on Cortry Prime. Dr. Vasquez has been most helpful in decoding certain ancient technologies that will be crucial to the convergence. The threat to Elena hit Amelia like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain steady. What exactly is the convergence? The next step in human evolution, Vorth replied. For too long, our species has been scattered across the galaxy, diluted by contact with inferior civilizations and weakened by comfortable living. The convergence will change that. He activated a holographic display showing a complex technological device, something that looked part weapon, part scientific instrument. 3,000 years ago, our predecessors made the mistake of trying to rule through force alone. They forgot that true power comes from unity of purpose and clarity of vision. The convergence will create that unity by eliminating the distractions that have made humanity weak. Amelia stared at the device in growing horror. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about refinement, Vorth corrected. The removal of impurities that have corrupted our species' potential. When the convergence is complete, humanity will emerge stronger, more focused, and better adapted to survival in a hostile universe. The full scope of the conspiracy became clear. The Cortry weren't just planning to conquer the Empire, they were planning to use its infrastructure to commit genocide on a galactic scale, eliminating entire populations they deemed unworthy, and rebuilding human civilization according to their ancient ideology. You have 48 hours to decide, Admiral, Vorth said, returning to his desk. Colonel Koss will escort you to your quarters. I suggest you use the time to consider not just your own future, but the future of your species. Amelia's quarters in the palace were luxurious by any standard, but she recognized them for what they truly were, a gilded cage. The room was certainly monitored, and probably shielded against most forms of communication. However, her years in naval intelligence had taught her a few tricks that even the Cortry might not anticipate. Using a technique learned during covert operations in the frontier systems, she disassembled her personal chronometer and reconfigured its quantum resonance coil into a short-range transmitter. The device would only work for a few minutes before burning out, but it might be enough to get a message to loyal forces. As she worked, Amelia's mind raced through everything she had learned. The convergence was planned for approximately 4 months from now, which meant the Cortry were in the final stages of preparation. Whatever device they had shown her was clearly the key to their plan, but she needed more information about how it worked and where it was located. Her improvised transmitter crackled to life, and she quickly sent a burst of encrypted data to Admiral Reyes. The message was necessarily brief. Convergence confirmed. Genocide weapon. 4 months. Elena alive, Cortry Prime. Need extraction. The device died with a small puff of smoke, but Amelia felt a grim satisfaction. If Reyes received the message, the Resistance would at least know what they were fighting against. A soft chime announced a visitor at her door. Amelia quickly disposed of the transmitter components and assumed a casual pose on the chamber's elegant sofa. Enter, she called. To her surprise, the person who entered wasn't Colonel Koss or one of his security personnel. Instead, she found herself facing a young woman in the uniform of a palace communications technician. The woman was perhaps 25, with short auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that reminded Amelia of her sister. "Admiral," the woman said quietly, glancing around the room nervously. "My name is Lieutenant Zara Okafor. I need to speak with you urgently." Amelia studied the young officer carefully. This could be another test, but something about Okafor's manner suggested genuine fear and desperation. "About what, Lieutenant?" Okafor moved closer and lowered her voice. "I know who you are and why you're here. I also know about the convergence, and I want to help stop it." "That's a very dangerous thing to say in the Imperial Palace," Amelia observed. "Everything is dangerous now," Okafor replied. "I've been monitoring the communications traffic for the past 6 months. I know about the mass arrests, the fleet repositioning, and the research being conducted on Quartry Prime. I also know about the resistance cells forming in the outer systems." She pulled out a small data chip and placed it on the table between them. "That contains everything I've been able to gather about the Convergence project. Technical specifications, personnel assignments, and most importantly, the location of the primary device." Amelia picked up the chip, noting its weight and construction. It was a high-capacity military storage device, capable of holding enormous amounts of data. "Why are you helping me?" Okafor's expression hardened. "Because I've seen what they're planning to do. The convergence isn't just about eliminating alien populations, it's about purifying humanity itself. Anyone who doesn't meet their genetic and ideological standards will be eliminated. That includes most of the people I care about." She pulled up a holographic display from her personal communicator, showing population analysis charts that made Amelia's blood run cold. The Quartry had classified the Empire's population into various categories based on genetic markers, planetary origin, and political reliability. The percentage marked for convergence processing was staggering, nearly 70% of the Empire's human population. "They're not just planning genocide," Amelia realized. "They're planning to remake the human species entirely. And they have the technology to do it," Okafor confirmed. "The ancient hegemony of shadows developed biotechnology far beyond anything we currently possess. They can literally rewrite genetic code on a planetary scale." Amelia studied the data more carefully. The technical specifications were beyond her understanding, but the scale of the operation was clear. Massive installations were being constructed on dozens of worlds, all connected to the primary device on Quartry Prime. "Lieutenant, how do we get off this planet?" Okafor smiled for the first time since entering the room. "I've been working on that problem for weeks. There's a supply convoy leaving for the Outer Rim tomorrow. I can get us aboard, but once we leave, there's no going back. They'll know we've betrayed them. Then we'd better make it count," Amelia replied, tucking the data chip into a hidden pocket in her uniform. "What about my sister? The intelligence suggests she's being held at the primary research facility on Quartry Prime. Rescuing her will require a full military operation." Amelia nodded grimly. Elena would have to wait until they could organize a proper assault. For now, the priority was getting the intelligence about the convergence to the resistance forces. "Lieutenant, once we're off-world, what are your plans?" "To fight," Okafor replied simply. "I joined the Imperial Navy to protect people, not to facilitate their extermination. If that means becoming a rebel, so be it." As they finalized their escape plans, Amelia reflected on the cruel irony of the situation. The Empire's own institutions were being used against it, and those who sought to preserve its ideals had been forced into the role of insurgents. But if the alternative was the convergence, then rebellion was not just justified, it was humanity's only hope for survival. The cargo bay of the transport Meridian Trader was cramped, dark, and filled with the acrid smell of industrial lubricants. Amelia and Lieutenant Okafor had been hiding among the supply containers for 6 hours, listening to the routine sounds of a commercial vessel going about its business. The ship was bound for the Altair system, where Admiral Reyes was reportedly organizing resistance forces. "Contact in 30 seconds, Okafor whispered, checking her chronometer. She had managed to establish communication protocols with Loyalist forces before their escape from the palace. If everything went according to plan, they would rendezvous with friendly ships at the edge of the Altair system. Amelia felt the subtle shift in the ship's vibration that indicated a drop from hyperspace. Through the thin bulkheads, she could hear the bridge crew beginning their standard arrival procedures. So far, their escape had gone unnoticed, but she knew that wouldn't last long. A new vibration thrummed through the ship's hull, the distinctive signature of military vessels powering up their weapons systems. "This is Imperial Security Command," a harsh voice announced over the ship's communication system. "Transport Meridian Trader, you will heave to and prepare for immediate boarding. Any attempt to flee or resist will result in your destruction." The cargo bay emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in ominous red. Amelia could hear the captain arguing with the security forces over the communications channel, insisting that his ship was operating under legitimate commercial authority. "They found us faster than expected," Okafor observed grimly. "Or they were already tracking us," Amelia replied. She moved to one of the cargo containers and began entering a security code. "Time to switch to Plan B." The container opened to reveal not industrial supplies, but military equipment, combat armor, weapons, and emergency survival gear. Okafor's eyes widened in surprise. "You expected this? I hoped I wouldn't need it," Amelia corrected, beginning to don the combat armor. "But Admiral Reyes taught me to always have an escape plan for the escape plan." The sound of cutting tools echoed through the ship as the security forces began forcing their way through the Meridian Trader's hull. The civilian crew would be unable to resist for long. Amelia activated her armor's tactical display and immediately saw the scope of their problem. 6 Imperial corvettes had surrounded the transport, with boarding parties already attached to multiple hull sections. Even if they could fight their way off the Meridian Trader, they would never make it past the security cordon. "Admiral," Okafor said quietly, "there might be another option." She had activated her own tactical display and was highlighting a section of the ship's blueprints. "The Meridian Trader carries emergency escape pods for exactly this kind of situation. If we can reach Pod Bay 3, we might be able to launch before they secure the ship." It was a desperate plan, but better than trying to fight 6 military vessels with small arms. Amelia secured the intelligence data and prepared to move. The sounds of combat echoed from the forward sections of the ship as the security forces encountered resistance from the crew. Amelia felt a surge of respect for the civilian spacers who were risking their lives to buy her time, even though they probably didn't fully understand what was at stake. "Move!" she ordered. They made their way through the ship's maintenance corridors, avoiding the main passages where security forces were conducting their search. The gravity fluctuated as the ship's power systems came under strain, and emergency klaxons wailed throughout the vessel. Pod Bay 3 was located in the ship's lower section, accessible through a maintenance shaft that required them to crawl through cramped spaces between hull sections. As they emerged into the bay, Amelia was relieved to see that the escape pods were still functional and hadn't been disabled by the boarding parties. 3 pods left, Okafor observed. "Should we take separate ones to improve our chances?" Amelia considered the option but rejected it. "No. We stay together. If one of us doesn't make it, the intelligence dies with us." They climbed into the nearest pod and began the launch sequence. The escape pod was designed for emergency evacuation, with minimal life support and no weapons systems. Their only hope was to get far enough away from the Meridian Trader to activate the pod's distress beacon, and hope that Loyalist forces would find them before Imperial security did. The pod launched with a violent acceleration that pressed them back into their seats. Through the small viewport, Amelia could see the Meridian Trader falling away behind them, its hull scarred by boarding torches and weapon impacts. "There!" Okafor pointed to a section of space where subtle distortions indicated ships running with stealth systems activated. 3 vessels, probably cruiser class. Amelia activated the distress beacon using the authentication codes Admiral Reyes had provided. Within minutes, they received a response. "Escape pod, this is Admiral Reyes aboard ISV Defiant. Are you secure?" Secure and carrying critical intelligence, Amelia replied. Request immediate pickup. Acknowledged. Stand by for recovery. As the Loyalist ships moved to retrieve them, Amelia watched the Imperial security forces continuing their assault on the Meridian trader. The civilian crew was still fighting, but it was clear they wouldn't hold out much longer. They're going to be tortured for information, Okafor said quietly. I know. The weight of responsibility for their suffering pressed down on Amelia like a physical force. But she also knew that their sacrifice might be the key to saving billions of lives. The escape pod was taken aboard the Defiant with smooth efficiency. As soon as they were through the airlock, Admiral Reyes was there to greet them personally. Admiral Vasquez? She said, extending her hand. I got your message. Please tell me you have something we can use. Amelia pulled out the data chip Lieutenant Okafor had provided. Everything they're planning, including technical specifications for the convergence device. But Admiral, it's worse than we thought. They're not just planning to conquer the Empire, they're planning to exterminate most of the human race. Rhea's expression hardened as she absorbed the implications. Then we'd better get to work. The fate of our civilization may depend on what we do in the next few months.